Commander Jeho stood on the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, his flagship stationed at the edge of the Galactic Empire's vast territory. He stared out through the reinforced glass dome, watching the endless expanse of space. It was beautiful, in a way dark, cold, and empty. But today, it felt different. Something about the stillness made him uneasy. Behind him, Lieutenant Hygiene adjusted her uniform nervously. She had been assigned to Jeho's crew only a few months ago, but she already knew he didn't like small talk. Still, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something bad was coming. "Sir," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Do you think we're ready? If whatever hit Outpost Delta comes here next." Jeho turned slowly, his face unreadable. His sharp eyes scanned hers for a moment before answering. "We've faced worse," he said simply. But even as he spoke, he wasn't sure he believed it himself. What had happened at Outpost Delta defied logic. No warning, no signal, just destruction. Outpost Delta had been one of the Empire's most advanced stations, equipped with cutting-edge technology designed to detect any threat light years away. Yet, when the distress call came, it lasted less than 10 seconds. Static screams, then nothing. By the time reinforcements arrived, there was no outpost left, just floating debris and scorched metal drifting silently in the void. Back at Central Command, the news had caused chaos. High-ranking officers shouted over each other, demanding answers. Scientists scrambled to analyze fragments recovered from the wreckage. Historians pored over ancient records, but no one found anything. Nothing matched the weapon signatures or ship designs uncovered at Delta. Whatever had attacked them wasn't listed in the Empire's massive database, a fact that terrified everyone more than the attack itself. For centuries, the unified Galactic Empire prided itself on knowing everything. Every planet, every species, every star charted and catalogued. Their knowledge was their power. And now, this unknown enemy proved they weren't as all-knowing as they thought. That realization sent ripples of fear through the highest levels of government. On the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, Jeho tried to focus on the task ahead. Orders had come down from above. Find the attackers. Stop them. Bring back proof of who or what they were dealing with. Simple enough on paper, but Jeho knew better. Space was too big, too unpredictable. Searching for an invisible enemy was like chasing shadows. "Lieutenant," he said suddenly, snapping Hygiene out of her thoughts. "Status report." She blinked, straightening up. "All systems operational, sir. Long-range scanners are active. Patrol drones deployed along the perimeter. We've received updates from nearby outposts, but so far, no unusual activity reported." Jeho nodded, though his expression remained grim. "Good. Keep monitoring. I want hourly updates." "Yes, sir." Hygiene hesitated, then added, "Permission to speak freely?" He raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "I've been thinking," she began cautiously. What if the reason we can't identify the attackers is because they don't exist in our records? What if they're not part of any known civilization?" Jeho sighed. He'd heard similar theories during briefings, whispered among junior officers and dismissed by their superiors. If they're not in the records, Lieutenant, it means they shouldn't exist. The Empire doesn't leave things undocumented. But what if they do? Hygiene pressed. What if they're older than us? Or smarter? Or just hiding? Her words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. Jeho didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned back to the viewport, his gaze fixed on the horizon of stars. For all their strength, the Empire relied on predictability. Rules, order. An enemy that didn't follow those rules was dangerous, not just because of its weapons, but because it challenged everything the Empire stood for. Before he could respond, Alarms blared across the bridge. Red lights flashed, and crew members rushed to their stations. "Report." Jeho barked. "Multiple contacts detected, Commander." One of the technicians shouted. They appeared out of nowhere, no entry signature, no warp trail. "How many?" "At least 20 vessels, sir. Unknown classification. Weapons armed." Jeho clenched his fists. This was it. The moment they'd been waiting for and dreading. Raise shields. Prepare all weapons. Send a message to Central Command. We're under attack. Hyjin moved quickly, relaying orders to the rest of the fleet. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed commands into her console, but her voice stayed steady. Outside the viewport, the first flashes of energy fire lit up the darkness. The enemy ships moved with impossible speed and precision, weaving between Imperial cruisers like ghosts. "They're targeting our engines." Someone yelled, "Divert auxiliary power to the aft shields." Jeho ordered, "Don't let them disable us." Explosions rocked the ship, throwing crew members off balance. Smoke filled the air as circuits overloaded and consoles sparked. Through it all, Jeho remained calm, issuing commands with unwavering authority. Beside him, Hyjin worked tirelessly, coordinating counterattacks and damage control, but it wasn't enough. The enemy was too fast, too strong. Within minutes, half the fleet was gone, reduced to burning wreckage. The remaining ships fought valiantly, but their efforts seemed futile against an opponent they couldn't understand. As another blast shook the eternal resolve. Jeho glanced at Hyjin. She looked back at him, her face pale but determined. "We need to retreat, sir," she said quietly, "or we'll lose everything." He wanted to argue, to fight until the very end. But deep down, he knew she was right. With a heavy heart, he gave the order. "All units, fall back to Sector Gamma. Regroup and reassess." The surviving ships limped away, pursued briefly by the enemy before they vanished as suddenly as they'd appeared. Silence returned to the battlefield, broken only by the faint crackle of dying engines and the soft hum of distant stars. On the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, Jeho slumped into his chair, exhausted. Around him, his crew worked to stabilize the damaged vessel. Hyjin approached cautiously, holding a datapad. "Casualty reports are coming in, sir," she said softly. "It's bad." He nodded, staring at the floor. Bad didn't begin to describe it. They'd lost ships, lives, and pride all in a matter of minutes. Worse, they still didn't know who or what they were fighting. The survivors regrouped in Sector Gamma, a remote corner of the Empire where stars were few and silence stretched endlessly. The Eternal Resolve limped into position alongside the remaining ships of the fleet, their hulls scarred and battered. Inside the flagship, Commander Jeho stood in the war room, staring at a holographic map of the battle zone. The red markers representing destroyed vessels outnumbered the blue ones still active. It was a grim picture. Lieutenant Hyjin entered the room quietly, carrying a stack of reports. She hesitated before speaking, unsure if she should interrupt his thoughts. But when Jeho noticed her standing there, he gestured for her to approach. "What do we have?" he asked, his voice low but steady. "Initial scans of the battlefield," she replied, placing the datapad on the table. "We found traces of energy signatures from the enemy weapons. They're unlike anything we've seen before. Fast, precise, and devastating." Jeho nodded slowly. He had expected as much. What worried him more was the lack of answers. Who were they? Where did they come from? Why had they attacked? These questions gnawed at him, keeping him awake at night. The Empire prided itself on knowing everything, yet here they were, blindsided by an invisible foe. "We need to find them," Jeho said finally. "Not just fight back, but understand why this happened." Hyjin looked surprised. "You think diplomacy is possible?" "I don't know," he admitted. But I do know that charging blindly into another battle will only get us killed. We need information, clues, anything. With that, Jeho ordered a reconnaissance mission into deep space. The goal was simple: follow the trail left behind by the enemy fleet and uncover its origins. Haijin volunteered to join him, eager to prove herself and help solve the mystery. Together, they assembled a small team and set out aboard the Shadowhawk, a fast and nimble scout ship designed for stealth. The journey was long and tense. Days passed without incident, the crew scanning every star system they passed for signs of activity. Morale was low. No one spoke unless necessary. Even Jeho, usually stoic, seemed weighed down by the enormity of their task. On the fifth day, they stumbled upon something unexpected. Drifting through the void were the remains of several alien ships, their twisted metal frames frozen in time. Haijin leaned forward in her seat, her eyes wide. "Sir, look. Those aren't Imperial vessels." Jeho frowned, studying the wreckage. The ships were old, their designs unfamiliar. Some bore strange symbols etched into their hull symbols that didn't match any known language or culture. "Scan them," he ordered. "See if you can pull anything useful from their systems." For hours, the crew worked tirelessly, sifting through fragments of data recovered from the ruined ships. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. These weren't random victims of piracy or war, they were refugees, fleeing from something far greater than themselves. Logs hinted at a catastrophic event in their past, though details were scarce. One phrase kept appearing over and over again in their fragmented transmissions. "Verity. What does it mean?" Haijin wondered aloud, staring at the word on her screen. A name? A place? Before anyone could answer, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Commander!" shouted the pilot. Multiple contacts detected. "Closing fast!" Jeho sprang into action. "Battle stations. Prepare for engagement." Outside the viewport, the enemy fleet appeared once more, materializing out of nowhere like phantoms. Their ships glowed faintly with an eerie light, moving with unnatural speed and precision. Energy beams lashed out, striking the Shadowhawk and its escorts with terrifying force. "Shields at 50%, cried the engineer. "We can't hold them off much longer." Jeho gritted his teeth, issuing rapid-fire commands. "Focus fire on the lead ship. Disable their engines if you can." The crew fought valiantly, but the outcome was inevitable. One by one, the escort ships were destroyed, leaving the Shadowhawk alone against overwhelming odds. Just as all hope seemed lost, a massive explosion rocked the enemy formation. A single vessel broke away from the chaos, spinning uncontrollably toward the Shadowhawk. "Tractor beam online," yelled the pilot. "Brace for impact." With a jolt, the rogue ship was pulled into the Shadowhawk's docking bay. Alarms continued to blare as the crew scrambled to secure the area. When the dust settled, Jeho led a team to investigate. What they found inside the captured vessel shocked them. A lone survivor lay unconscious on the floor, clad in armor marked with the same strange symbols they'd seen earlier. His features were humanoid but distinctly alien, with sharp cheekbones and pale skin. Around his neck hung a pendant engraved with the word Verity. "He's alive," Haijin whispered, kneeling beside him. "Should we wake him up?" Jeho hesitated. Capturing an enemy combatant was both a risk and an opportunity. If they could communicate with him, they might finally learn the truth. But if he refused to cooperate or worse, turned violent, they'd be back to square one. "Take him to the medical bay," Jeho decided. "Keep him sedated until we figure out what to do next." Back on the bridge, Haijin couldn't stop thinking about the symbols. Something about them felt familiar, though she couldn't place why. That night, unable to sleep, She accessed the ship's database and began cross-referencing the markings with historical records. Hours passed and frustration mounted. Nothing matched. Until, suddenly, a fragment of text caught her eye. It was old. Very old. A forgotten archive buried deep within the Empire's archives mentioned a civilization known as the Varathi. According to legend, they had been allies of early human settlers, sharing knowledge and resources during humanity's first steps into the stars. But centuries ago, they vanished without explanation, leaving behind only whispers of betrayal. Hyjin's heart raced. Could this be the key to understanding their enemy? She rushed to Jaeho's quarters, bursting in without knocking. "Sir, you need to see this." Startled, Jaeho sat up, rubbing his tired eyes. "What is it?" "The symbols," she said breathlessly. "They belong to the Varathi, an ancient civilization that disappeared long ago. There are legends that say they were betrayed by humans." "By us?" Jaeho stared at her, stunned. "Betrayed? By the Empire?" The implications were staggering. If true, it meant the attacks weren't random. "They were revenge. We need to talk to him," Jaeho said firmly, referring to their captive. Now, when they arrived in the medical bay, the alien was awake, restrained but calm. His piercing gaze locked onto Jaeho as he entered the room. For a moment, neither side moved. Then, cautiously, Hyjin held up a tablet displaying the symbol from his pendant. "Do you recognize this?" she asked softly. The alien's expression hardened. He didn't respond. Hyjin tried again, pointing to the word Varathi. "This is your people, isn't it? You're not just attacking us. You're fighting for something bigger." Still, the alien remained silent. Frustrated, Jaeho stepped closer. "Look, we don't want to hurt you. We're trying to understand. Help us." Finally, the alien spoke, his voice deep and gravelly. "Why should I trust you?" "Because if you don't," Jaeho replied evenly, "we'll never stop coming after you. And neither will you." The alien studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "My name is Kalem," he said. "And yes, I am Varathi." Kalem's story unfolded slowly, pieced together over hours of tense conversation. Centuries ago, his people had indeed allied with humanity, teaching them how to navigate the stars. But greed and fear drove the humans to turn on their benefactors, stealing their technology and driving them into exile. Those who survived vowed to return one day and reclaim what was theirs. They promised peace. Kalem growled, his fists clenched. "Instead, they gave us war. Now, we take back our home." Jaeho listened silently, guilt weighing heavily on his shoulders. The empire he served wasn't perfect, but he'd never imagined it capable of such cruelty. Still, now wasn't the time for apologies. "If you destroy us, you'll lose everything," he said. "There's another way." Kalem laughed bitterly. "Diplomacy? After what you've done?" "It's worth a try," Hyjin interjected. "Isn't it?" Kalem didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back, closing his eyes. The weight of centuries rested on his shoulders, and though he wanted justice, he also knew the cost of endless conflict. For now, he chose to remain silent, leaving Jaeho and Hyjin to ponder their next move. As the Shadowhawk drifted through the cold emptiness of space, the seeds of doubt began to take root, not just in the minds of the crew, but in the hearts of those who had always trusted the Empire's infallibility. The road ahead would be difficult, but perhaps, just perhaps, redemption was still possible. The Shadowhawk sped back toward the Empire's central command, carrying not just the weight of its battered hull, but also the burden of secrets that could change everything. Commander Jaeho stood on the bridge, his arms crossed as he stared out at the endless stars. His mind raced with questions. How much of Kalem's story was true? If it was, how far would the Empire go to cover it up? And most importantly, What could they do about it? Beside him, Lieutenant Hygiene worked quietly at her console, reviewing the data they had gathered from the Varathi ruins and Callum's ship. Her hands moved quickly over the controls, but her expression was troubled. She glanced at Jeho occasionally, wanting to say something but holding back. Finally, she spoke. "Sir, if this gets out, people will panic." Jeho nodded without looking at her. "They'll deny it first. Then they'll try to bury it. But we can't let them," Hygiene insisted. "If the Empire betrayed the Varathi, then we're responsible for all of this. We owe them the truth." Jeho sighed. He admired her idealism, even if it sometimes bordered on naivety. "It's not that simple," he said. "The Empire doesn't admit mistakes. Not when it means losing power." Hygiene frowned. "So what do we do? Just sit back and watch them start another war?" "No," Jeho replied firmly. "We find a way to make them listen. But we need proof, something undeniable." The rest of the journey passed in tense silence. When they finally docked at Central Command, a swarm of officials greeted them, demanding answers. High-ranking generals and politicians filled the briefing room, their faces stern and impatient. Jeho stood at the front, flanked by Hygiene and 2 armed guards escorting Callum. "Commander Jeho," barked Admiral Minsu, the head of the military council. "Report. What have you found?" Jeho took a deep breath. "We've identified the attackers. They call themselves the Varathi. Their ships match the ones that attacked Outpost Delta and our fleet in Sector Gamma." A murmur rippled through the room. Admiral Minsu leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And who are these? Varathi? They're descendants of an ancient civilization," Hygiene interjected, stepping forward. "One that existed before the Empire. According to records we uncovered, they were allies of early human settlers." Admiral Minsu scoffed. "Allies? That's impossible. There's no record of such a thing." "That's because the Empire erased them," Hygiene shot back, her voice rising slightly. "After betraying them." The room erupted into chaos. Voices shouted over each other, accusing her of treason, conspiracy, insanity. Admiral Minsu slammed his fist on the table, silencing everyone. "Enough!" he roared. "This is ridiculous. Do you expect us to believe some fairy tale based on scraps of old data?" "It's not a fairy tale," Jeho said calmly. "We brought one of them back. He's here now." Callum stepped forward, his presence commanding despite his restraints. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Admiral Minsu broke the silence. "What nonsense is this? An alien? Why wasn't I informed immediately?" "He's offered to explain," Jeho continued, "but only if we agree to hear him out." Admiral Minsu hesitated, glancing around the room. The Emperor himself had ordered a full report, and ignoring Callum would raise too many questions. Reluctantly, he nodded. "Fine, let him speak." Callum's voice was steady and clear as he recounted his people's history. Centuries ago, the Varathi had shared their knowledge with humanity, teaching them how to harness energy, build starships, and explore the galaxy. In return, they asked only for peace and mutual respect. But humans grew greedy. They saw the Varathi's advanced technology as a threat and launched a surprise attack, driving them into exile. "For generations we hid," Callum said, his tone bitter. "We rebuilt. We trained. We swore to reclaim what was stolen from us. Your empire may have forgotten us, but we never forgot you." When he finished, the room remained silent. Some looked shaken, others skeptical. Admiral Minsu was the first to recover. "Even if this story is true, and I'm not saying it is, it doesn't justify attacking us unprovoked." "It does," Callum countered. "You stole our home. You destroyed our people. Now we take it back. Admiral Minsu's face reddened with anger. We won't negotiate with terrorists. Before anyone could respond, Hyjin stepped forward again. With respect, sir, maybe we should. If what Calum says is true, then we started this. We made them enemies. Maybe it's time we tried making them allies instead. The suggestion sparked outrage. Officers shouted objections, accusing her of disloyalty. Admiral Minsu glared at her. Lieutenant, you're dangerously close to insubordination. I'm trying to prevent a war, she shot back. Isn't that worth breaking protocol? Her words hung in the air, heavy and defiant. For a moment, it seemed like Admiral Minsu might order her arrest. But before he could act, the Emperor's representative, a frail-looking man named Chancellor Park, cleared his throat. Enough, he said softly, yet his voice carried authority. Let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. Chancellor Park turned to Jae-ho. Commander, do you believe this? Alliance is possible? Jae-ho hesitated. He didn't trust Calum completely, but he knew war would destroy both sides. I believe it's worth trying, sir. Otherwise, we risk losing everything. Chancellor Park nodded thoughtfully. Very well. Arrange a meeting with the Verithi leadership. But be warned, if this fails, the consequences will fall on your shoulders. With the decision made, preparations began for a summit between the Empire and the Verithi. A neutral planet was chosen as the location, far from Imperial territory. Jae-ho and Hyjin were assigned to lead the delegation, tasked with brokering peace while keeping a wary eye on Calum, who agreed to act as a mediator. As they traveled to the designated site, tensions ran high. Trust was fragile, and every interaction felt like walking on thin ice. During one quiet moment aboard the diplomatic cruiser, Hyjin approached Calum, who sat alone in the observation lounge. Why are you helping us? She asked bluntly. Calum looked at her, his expression unreadable. Because my people are tired of fighting. We want our home back, but we don't want more bloodshed. If there's a chance to end this peacefully, I'll take it. Hyjin studied him, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she nodded. I hope it works. So do I, Calum replied. But don't mistake my cooperation for forgiveness. What your empire did, it can't be undone. She didn't argue. Instead, she turned away, feeling the weight of centuries of pain pressing down on her. As much as she wanted to believe in a better future, she couldn't shake the fear that peace might be too late. When they arrived at the neutral planet, the scene was surreal. Imperial delegates and Verithi representatives faced each other across a massive circular table, their expressions guarded. The air crackled with tension, each side waiting for the other to make the first move. Jae-ho opened the negotiations, speaking carefully to avoid provoking either side. We're here to find common ground, he began, to stop the cycle of violence and build a future where both our peoples can coexist. The Verithi leader, a tall, imposing figure named Soren, nodded slowly. Coexistence is possible, but trust must come first. For hours, they debated terms, argued over grievances, and struggled to find compromises. Progress was slow, but it was progress nonetheless. By the end of the first day, tentative agreements had been reached, though nothing concrete enough to celebrate. That night, as Hyjin reviewed the notes from the talks, she noticed movement outside her quarters. Stepping into the corridor, she found Jae-ho pacing anxiously. Trouble sleeping? She asked. He stopped, offering a weak smile. Too much on my mind. What about you? Same, she admitted. Do you think we're doing the right thing? Jae-ho sighed. I don't know, but I do know that doing nothing would be worse. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Both of them rushed to the bridge, hearts pounding. On the main screen, a fleet of Imperial warships appeared, weapons locked on the Verithi vessels. Someone had betrayed them. This wasn't authorized. Jeho shouted into the comm system, "Stand down." But the response came cold and final. Orders from Central Command. Eliminate the threat. Panic spread among the delegates. Soren grabbed Callum, his eyes blazing with fury. "You lied to us." "No." Hyjin shouted, stepping between them. "We didn't know. Please, let us fix this." Time seemed to slow as chaos erupted around them. Shots fired. Shouts echoed. And in the middle of it all, Jeho made a choice. Turning to Hyjin, he said, "Get to the bridge. Disable their targeting systems. I'll hold them off." "What?" "No," she protested. "You'll get killed." "Just do it," he snapped, shoving her toward the door. "Trust me." Tears blurred her vision as she ran, knowing she might never see him again. On the bridge, she fought her way past traitorous officers, her hands trembling as she hacked into the flagship's controls. With seconds to spare, she disabled the enemy fleet's weapons, buying enough time for the Varethi to retaliate. Back on the ground, Jeho sacrificed himself to protect the summit, taking a fatal blast meant for Callum. As his body crumpled to the floor, Hyjin screamed his name, collapsing beside him. To her grief, she realized what he had done, not just for her, but for everyone. The betrayal was exposed. Evidence of the Empire's plot broadcasted live across the galaxy, turning public opinion against the corrupt officials who had orchestrated the attack. In the aftermath, the Emperor abdicated, and a new News of the betrayal spread like wildfire, carried by encrypted signals and whispered conversations in every corner of the Empire. People who had once trusted their leaders now questioned everything. Holographic broadcasts showed grainy footage of the attack on the neutral planet, the Imperial fleet turning on its own negotiators, Commander Jeho sacrificing himself to save the fragile peace talks. It was a moment that would define generations. Lieutenant Hyjin stood at the center of it all, her hands trembling as she addressed the crowd gathered outside Central Command. Thousands had turned out, demanding justice for what they called the betrayal. Her voice wavered but remained steady enough to carry over the noise. "We failed," she said simply. "Not just the Varethi, but ourselves. We let fear and greed blind us. But we can fix this, together." Behind her, Callum watched silently, his arms crossed. He didn't trust humans, not completely, but he respected Hyjin. She had risked everything to stop the attack, even when it meant losing someone she cared about. Still, respect wasn't the same as forgiveness. The scars ran too deep for that. Inside Central Command, chaos reigned. The Emperor had abdicated under pressure, leaving a power vacuum that no one seemed prepared to fill. High-ranking officials scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal, pointing fingers and making empty promises. Meanwhile, the newly formed council struggled to regain control, their debates loud and disorganized. Hyjin walked into the council chamber uninvited, her uniform stained with ash and blood. Every eye turned to her, some curious, others hostile. Ignoring their stares, she placed a datapad on the table. "This is evidence," she said firmly. "Proof of who ordered the attack. Proof of how far they were willing to go to maintain their lies. If you want to rebuild trust, start here." Council members leaned forward, scanning the documents. Names appeared: generals, politicians, even members of the royal family implicated in the conspiracy. Gasps filled the room, followed by angry shouts. Chancellor Park, still clinging to his position, slammed his fist on the table. "Do you realize what this means? This will tear the Empire apart." "Good," Hyjin replied coldly. "Maybe it needs tearing apart." Her words silenced the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Chancellor Park nodded. "Very well. Arrest them all. Let the courts decide their fate." As arrests began, protests erupted across the empire. Some supported the purge, calling it a necessary step toward reform. Others feared it was the beginning of collapse. Amid the turmoil, Hyjin found herself torn between grief and purpose. Jaeho's death weighed heavily on her, but she couldn't afford to stop. Too much depended on her now. Days turned into weeks. The council worked tirelessly to draft new policies, aiming to create a government based on transparency rather than secrecy. Hyjin became a key figure in these efforts, advocating for cooperation with the Varathi. She spent countless hours meeting with Kellam and other representatives, trying to bridge the gap between their peoples. It wasn't easy. Distrust lingered on both sides. Many imperial citizens viewed the Varathi as monsters, while the Varathi saw humans as invaders. Old wounds refused to heal, reopening with every disagreement. Progress came slowly, painfully. One evening, after another exhausting day of negotiations, Hyjin joined Kellam on the observation deck of the diplomatic station. They stood side by side, looking out at the stars. Neither spoke for a while, the silence comfortable despite their differences. "You remind me of him," Kellam said finally, breaking the quiet. "Jaeho." Hyjin blinked, surprised. "How?" He believed in something bigger than himself. "So do you." Kellam paused, choosing his words carefully. "The belief alone won't be enough. My people, they've suffered too much. They won't forgive easily." "I know," Hyjin admitted, "and I don't expect them to. All I can do is try. Show them that not all humans are the same." Kellam studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You've earned my respect, Lieutenant. Don't waste it." Their conversation ended there, but it left Hyjin feeling a little lighter. Respect wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, she threw herself into her work, pushing harder than ever to make the alliance succeed. Slowly, small victories began to add up. A joint task force was established, combining human and Varathi technology to repair damaged planets and rebuild infrastructure. Cultural exchange programs were launched, allowing civilians to interact and learn from each other. Skeptics mocked these efforts as naive, but Hyjin ignored them. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but it would happen. Still, challenges remained. Hardliners within the empire plotted against the reforms, spreading propaganda and inciting violence. One night, as Hyjin returned to her quarters, an explosion rocked the station. Alarms blared as smoke filled the corridors. She grabbed a fire extinguisher and rushed toward the source, only to find Kellam already there, helping injured crew members escape. "What happened?" she demanded, coughing through the haze. "Sabotage," Kellam growled, his face grim. "Someone doesn't want this to work." Together, they helped contain the damage, working alongside emergency teams until the danger passed. When it was over, Hyjin collapsed into a chair, exhausted. Kellam sat beside her, handing her a bottle of water. "You're going to get yourself killed if you keep this up," he said bluntly. "Maybe," she replied with a weak smile. "But if I don't, who will?" Kellam didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the floor, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he said, "I'll help you. Not because I trust your empire, but because I trust you." His words caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." With Kellam's support, Hyjin redoubled her efforts, targeting the root causes of resistance within the empire. She uncovered secret networks of loyalists planning coups and exposed their plans before they could act. Each victory brought her closer to her goal, but also deeper into danger. One evening, as she reviewed intelligence reports in her office, a shadow moved in the corner of her vision. Before she could react, a man stepped into the light, a high-ranking officer she recognized from the old regime. His name was General Choi, and he looked furious. "You've caused enough trouble," he snarled, raising a weapon. Time to end this. Hyjin froze, her mind racing. Escape seemed impossible. But then, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Put the gun down, General." Kellum entered the room, his own weapon trained on Choi. The general hesitated, glaring at him. "You dare interfere?" "Try me," Kellum replied, his tone icy. For a moment, it seemed like violence was inevitable. Then, with a growl of frustration, Choi lowered his weapon and backed away. "This isn't over," he spat before disappearing into the shadows. Hyjin exhaled sharply, her legs giving out beneath her. Kellum rushed to her side, steadying her. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though her hand still shook. "Thanks to you." He didn't respond, instead focusing on securing the area. Once he was satisfied they were safe, he turned back to her. "You can't keep doing this alone. It's too dangerous." "I don't have a choice," she insisted. "If I stop, everything falls apart." Kellum frowned, clearly frustrated. "Then let me help." "Let us help. You're not the only one fighting for this." Reluctantly, Hyjin agreed. From that point on, she worked closely with Kellum and other allies, pooling resources and sharing strategies. Their collaboration proved effective, dismantling opposition faster than anyone expected. Public support for the reforms grew, bolstered by stories of cooperation and mutual sacrifice thought by the time the first anniversary of the summit arrived. Significant progress had been made. A formal treaty was signed, officially recognizing the Virathi as equals and granting them sovereignty over their ancestral lands. Celebrations broke out across the galaxy, marking the beginning of a new era. Standing on the stage during the ceremony, Hyjin felt a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride for what they had achieved and sorrow for those who hadn't lived to see it. As fireworks lit up the sky, she glanced at Kellum, who stood nearby. Their eyes met briefly, unspoken understanding passing between them. The road ahead would still be difficult. Old hatreds wouldn't disappear overnight, and new challenges would undoubtedly arise. But for the first time in centuries, hope burned brightly in the hearts of two peoples bound by pain and promise. Looking up at the stars, Hyjin allowed herself a small smile. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 1 year after the signing of the treaty, the unified Galactic Empire no longer looked like the empire it once was. Gone were the rigid hierarchies and iron-fisted control. In their place stood a fragile but hopeful coalition of humans and Virathi, working together to rebuild what centuries of betrayal had destroyed. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was progress. Lieutenant Hyjin walked through the bustling streets of Central Command Station, now renamed Unity Hub. The air buzzed with activity. Traders haggled over goods. Children laughed as they played near fountains, and banners celebrating peace fluttered in the artificial breeze. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of belonging, not just to the Empire, but to something greater. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Hardliners still plotted in secret, spreading fear and misinformation. Some imperial. Citizens resented sharing power with the Virathi, while others clung to old prejudices, refusing to see them as equals. On the other side, many Virathi doubted humanity's sincerity, convinced that another betrayal was inevitable. Hyjin knew better than anyone how delicate this peace truly was. Every day, she worked tirelessly to keep it alive, mediating disputes, addressing grievances, and ensuring that both sides honored their commitments. It was exhausting, but she couldn't imagine doing anything else. That evening, she met Kellum aboard the Harmonia, a newly commissioned starship designed to symbolize cooperation between their peoples. Its sleek silver hull gleamed under the station's lights, adorned with symbols representing both human and Virathi cultures. Inside, crews from both species worked side by side, their camaraderie a testament to what could be achieved when trust replaced fear. Callum greeted her with a nod, his expression unreadable. "You look tired," he observed. "I am," she admitted, leaning against the railing. "But I'll survive." He studied her for a moment, then said, "You've done more than anyone expected. Don't forget to take care of yourself." She smiled faintly. Easier said than done. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars through the viewport. Despite everything they'd been through, moments like this were rare, quiet, unguarded. Finally, Callum spoke. "Do you think it'll last? The peace?" Hyjin asked, glancing at him. When he nodded, she sighed. "I don't know. I hope so, but even if it doesn't, we have to try. Giving up isn't an option." Her words resonated deeply with him. He had lost so much: his family, his home, his faith in justice. Yet here he was, standing beside someone who refused to give up, no matter how hard things got. It gave him strength, even when doubt threatened to overwhelm him. As they prepared to leave the ship, an urgent message arrived. A distress signal from the outer rim, a remote colony under attack by unknown forces. Details were scarce, but one thing was clear. Whoever was behind it wanted chaos. Without hesitation, Hyjin and Callum boarded the Harmonia and set course for the colony. Along the way, they reviewed intelligence reports, searching for clues. What they found chilled them to the bone. The attackers weren't Varathi or human. They were remnants of the old regime, extremists determined to destroy the Alliance. "They're using fear to turn people against each other," Hyjin said grimly. "If we don't stop them, everything we've built will collapse." When they arrived at the colony, the scene was devastating. Fires raged across the settlement, smoke choking the air. Survivors huddled together, terrified and injured. Above them, enemy ships circled like vultures, their weapons trained on the ground below. Hyjin wasted no time. "Deploy medical teams and secure the perimeter. We need to protect these people." Callum led a squad of mixed-species soldiers into the fray, engaging the enemy with precision and courage. Together, they fought back, driving the attackers away and securing the area. By the time the battle ended, dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Exhausted but victorious, Hyjin surveyed the damage. The colony would recover, it always did, but the scars would remain. As she tended to the wounded, she noticed a small boy clutching a broken toy. His eyes were wide with fear, but when she knelt beside him, he managed a shaky smile. "It's okay," she said gently. "We're here now. You're safe." Later, as the survivors were evacuated to safer zones, Hyjin confronted the leader of the extremist group, a fanatical officer named Captain Ru. He sneered at her, unrepentant even in defeat. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning. People will never accept them." "Maybe not all of them," Hyjin replied calmly. "But enough will. That's enough to make a difference." Back aboard the Harmonia, Callum joined her on the bridge. "What now?" he asked. "We keep going," she said firmly. "Every victory matters. Every life saved matters." Over the next few months, Hyjin and Callum traveled across the galaxy, addressing conflicts and strengthening ties between their peoples. They faced resistance at every turn, but they also witnessed moments of hope: human farmers sharing crops with Varathi refugees, scientists collaborating on groundbreaking projects, children learning each other's languages and traditions. Slowly, trust began to grow. Old wounds started to heal. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One night, as they stood on the observation deck of the Harmonia, Hyjin turned to Callum. "Do you think Jeho would be proud of us?" Callum thought for a moment, then nodded. "He believed in you, in all of us. I think he'd be proud." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I miss him." "Me too," Callum admitted quietly. "But he's still here in everything we do." They stood there for a long time, watching the stars stretch endlessly before them. The road ahead would still be difficult. fraught with challenges neither of them could predict. But for the first time in a long time, they felt ready to face it. Dashed together. In the distance, a new star flared to life, its light reaching them across the void. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through. And so, the galaxy moved forward, not as separate factions, but as one fragile, imperfect family. United not by blood or borders, but by the shared dream of a better future.